Welcome to Evo Lounge. My name is Brooke McCarthy. Have you ever thought about the connection between the Navy, film acting, and Burning Man? Well, neither had I, until I talked to this episode's guest. Join me as I sit down with actor Reg Rozee as he shares his unique journey into acting and what the industry is like in 2020.
Okay, well, my name is Reg Rozee. I'm an actor here in Vancouver. I retired from the Navy a little early, about 6 years ago, and took some acting classes just as a birthday present to myself, and kind of ended up liking it. So when I did my first audition after about a year of classes, I got the part. I've been hooked ever since.
So how did you go from the Navy? You just decided to just take acting classes after going to the Navy, or did you act in high school or anything?
Yeah, I've always been sort of involved in that kind of stuff. You know, I used to make my own radio plays when I was 8 or 9 years old with a tape recorder and homemade sound effects, and we'd make haunted houses and stages and shows. And I was in a band in high school. But also my job, I mean, I was a naval officer, and it's kind of like being on stage when you're on the bridge, right? You need presence, bridge presence, you know, command presence. If you speak quietly or you seem nervous, no one will listen to you. So a lot of what you're doing is public speaking, and you have an audience all the time. So you tend to find a lot of people that are pretty extroverted or loud in that job.
So how did you did you just start auditioning and then you just happened to get in, or did you how did you start? Yeah.
I was doing background for a while. I mean, I started doing that years and years ago, and I'd stopped while I was in the Navy, and I kind of picked it up as a part-time job when I came back out here as retirement. It's a great way to meet people, but I never really thought about acting. I took the class as a gag to see if I liked it, and I ended up loving it. And I knew the coach from movies that I watched when I was younger too, so I responded to that. And then a friend of mine who was acting as, he was working at the agency I was represented when, just for background, she said, "There's an audition you should go to just to see." You know, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not ready for that." But she said, "You know, might as well try, see what happens. It's a good experience." So I went, and she called me later and she said, "Well, I've got good news and bad news," which people always say. And I said, "All right." She said, "The bad news is you didn't get, or the bad news is, I suppose, you didn't get the part." And I was like, "Okay, well, what's the good news?" And she said, "Well, they liked you so much, they wrote another one for you." So it was fun, and it was actually required very little skill, I suppose, because I was a coma patient. But they just wanted to have me in, and I was like, "Oh, that's great." So my first actual audition acting gig, I ended up as a coma patient on Untold Stories of the ER.
Do you have any favorite stories from being on set or anything? Like any funny stories or favorite memories sort of thing?
I think most of my favorite memories are probably from some of the student films I've done, or the indies, you know, just with principal work. Some of them, we did an indie that's on Amazon Prime right now, and we improvised every line of dialogue in it. It was a ton of work, but we all had a direction the scene needed to go, and we all had our characters developed. And the director would just shoot it maybe 5 or 6 times longer than he needed and let us improvise the intent of the scene. And then when we had to ADR it all later, they had to transcribe everything we said because there was no script. So it was a lot of work, but it turned out really cool.
So what have you been working on recently? Have you been doing anything? I know COVID to change the whole scene here, obviously.
Yeah.
So how has that been the past couple months and then coming up now sort of thing?
Well, I still do background to pay the bills as well. And that's interesting, working on the bigger sets, because they're probably the safest places there are right now. They're so careful. Everyone has at least one COVID test before they're on set, usually 2. There's COVID safety officers and mandatory masks and people patrolling and everything being decontaminated. So that's kind of neat. So you're safe. I've done some indie stuff. It's a little harder right now with how restricted we are. But we're one of the fellows I'm working with. We've done some comedy stuff before, and we finished one called Power of the Wingman, which is this odd sort of medieval fantasy style comedy, and it did really well so far. So we're kind of caught halfway through filming the sequel with the restrictions right now.
I've also heard that you make your own costumes as well occasionally.
Yeah, well, yeah, I started doing that ages ago, and actually the shorts I was just talking about, the wingman ones, I have chainmail and scale armor that I made myself, and there's another big chunk of chainmail that the director and writer has. So mine just kind of fit in with it because I'm this sort of holy knight that's having a really bad day. So all of those weird little pieces helped, and I'd made a lot of those for my my Burning Man adventure that I went on with a really good friend. I wanted stuff that, you know, was inflammable because, well, not flammable, because I was spinning fire and everyone around us was spinning fire, and you don't really want to wear something that's going to go up in a puff of smoke. So I thought metal is probably pretty safe. And it gives you that Mad Max vibe that everyone sort of wears at Burning Man, too.
Yeah. All right, so what brought you to Burning Man? That's quite the jump.
Well, you know, a good friend of mine has been there multiple times, and he was looking for a little bit of extra help. And I was like, you know, I'd be glad to help out if I'll come along. I thought I was just going to kind of sit back. He's like, oh no, you know, you can get into the performance. I already was doing stilt walking on jumping stilts. So I ended up spinning like a fire spear on jumping stilts and carrying a giant metal dragon's head with flaming horns and teeth and everything all over it.
Just happened to. Just.
So it was a really life-changing experience. I was going through some changes in my own life, and I wanted an epic quest to kind of mark that, and Burning Man certainly delivered, that's for sure.
Do you have like a favorite project or thing that you've worked on, or even like just favorite project or job or thing that you've worked on?
There's a short I made for a student film years ago called I say years ago, it's like 3 years ago, called Where's Violet? That was like this little 15-16 minute horror film. And boy, did that sucker have legs. Like, they made it in film school, and it got into film festivals all over the world. It made it into the Moscow International Horror Festival. Like, there's a poster with me and Vladimir Putin on it that they used. Our director won Best New Director in Tokyo, I think, with it. So it was a really fun one. And so many film students have seen it too, that it's one of the only things I've done that I get recognized from having done when I don't know the person I'm talking to. So that's cool. And I really like that kind of villainous character, you know, that's charismatic, but you know he's a bad guy. You know, I love those roles. Not the stereotype cookie cutter ones, but the villain that you can kind of see their point too, right? I think a solid villain character is someone that the story's just being told from someone else's point of view. In their head, they're the hero.
Yeah, that's always like the best when you can understand the villain. You know, it's like a well-written villain.
Oh, absolutely.
So what would you say to someone who like is in a different career and was always liked acting and would maybe want to go back and do it again?
Well, what I did, which is a great idea when there isn't pandemic, I suppose, is I went to like a weekend short intro to acting for, I think it was intro to acting for 40 plus class, just to kind of see what it was like. And I was introduced to Meisner technique and some of the fundamentals of method acting and stuff. And you know, we've done stage improv, warm-up exercises, all sorts of stuff comes into that sort of thing. And once you get into it, you'll find out right away if you like it. I loved it. And it's not really just about acting either. I mean, you do a lot of work on yourself to work that way, because you have to drop all those walls and develop a real level of emotional truthfulness that a lot of us hide from our whole life. So yeah, that can be scary, but it can also be a real self-development journey.
Yeah, it's definitely as much working on yourself as you are working on the character. You sort of kind of like learn more about yourself as you're learning about the character, which is really cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you so much to Reg Rozee for chatting with me this week. If you want to see some of his work, you can check out The Power of the Wingman on YouTube. My name is Brooke McCarthy. If you want to see more stuff like this, check out evolution1079.com.